When I was in middle school, I was a pretty shy kid. It was the Friday before spring break, and I was really excited for it as my parents were allowing my best friend to stay over for the weekend. Honestly, it was all I could think about the whole day. Now, it's important to note that I would never ride the bus to or from school. My parents were pretty protective, and despite living in a relatively friendly neighborhood, they were never keen on the idea of me taking a bus or even just walking home. I didn't mind, but of course, that meant that one of my parents would have to pick me up each day. Each time they did, the school would have whoever was picking me up give them their signature for the school's records. This meant that for me to leave school, I would need that signature. This day specifically, my aunt and uncle were supposed to pick me up from school as both my parents were working late. But by the time the bell rang, I could tell neither my aunt's nor my uncle's car were anywhere in the parking lot. I waited for a good 45 minutes, slowly watching, as the parking lot got less and less busy. By this point, it was almost empty. I was the only one in the lobby, and I was starting to get nervous that they forgot to pick me up. I decided it was best to walk down to the office and inform someone of the situation. As I did, I saw some random guy, maybe mid-40s, with a duffel bag walk in the building. I met eyes with him but quickly looked back down at the floor, continuing toward the office. When I got there, I told a lady everything. She sat me down in her office. I gave her my aunt and uncle's phone number, and she tried calling them, but of course they didn't answer. I then gave her my dad's phone number, and luckily he did answer. He informed the lady that either my aunt or uncle should have been there by now. He told her he would try calling them as he couldn't get off work for a couple hours. By this point, it had been around an hour and a half since school got out, and I was on edge. The whole situation was stressful, as I knew I was keeping this lady from going home, and I could tell she was losing her patience. I was literally the last kid in the building. Around 5 minutes later, nothing had come of the situation yet, but just then, a man in a janitor's uniform walked into the office. I could instantly tell it was the same man with the duffel bag that I had seen on my way to the office, just now in a janitor's uniform. He started talking with the office lady. I remember this part clearly. The man eventually asked what she was still doing at the school, and she proceeded to explain our whole situation. The man then looked at me and told me he lived right next to my aunt and uncle's house, and that he was willing to give me a ride on his way back home. At that point, 2 red flags were going off in my head. Firstly, if I had just seen this guy entering the building only a few minutes ago, why would he already be leaving to go home? Secondly, how could he even know where my aunt and uncle lived, as that information was never given anywhere in the conversation? My thoughts were interrupted when the office lady explained that it was a great idea. I could literally see the relief in her eyes, as she would no longer have to wait for my ride to show up. Not even 2 seconds later, the guy grabbed my hand and started practically dragging me toward the front door. I expected the office lady to say something, but when I glanced back at her, I could tell she wasn't going to do anything. By some stroke of luck, as I was being pulled out the front door, I saw my uncle's car pulling into the parking lot. I screamed that my uncle was here, and the guy froze for a second. But as my uncle got closer, he let go and started speed walking in the opposite direction. Apparently, the reason my uncle was so late was because of a terrible traffic accident. At the time, he didn't even have a cell phone, so there was no way he could have called the school to inform them. When I got in the car with my uncle, he asked me who the guy was that was holding on to me. I explained everything. He was shocked and quickly reported the situation to the school. I never saw either that lady or the janitor again, so I don't know if they were fired or what. I actually have a theory that the guy was never a real janitor, as what janitor would enter the school in regular clothes and leave only minutes after he got there? Either way, the whole thing was really traumatizing for me, and it still haunts me to this day. It was the last week of school in middle school, and I remember you could feel the tension as everyone knew summer break was almost here. A lot of my friends and I were messing around, as realistically there was nothing to do the last week anyway. I remember toward the end of the day I was in my last class, gym. Somewhere during that time, I got thirsty and needed to use the water fountain. Our school was really old, so the only working fountains were near the main entrance. As I was heading there, I realized how quiet it had gotten. Usually during the school day, you could hear teachers from classrooms. I thought it was weird, but my thoughts were interrupted by a kid in an older grade. speed walking down the hall toward the other end of the school. He had no backpack, and I noticed the look on his face. He looked angry, with one hand in his pocket and the other holding up his sagging pants. I thought he was walking toward me at first, but he walked right past. I thought it was weird, but ignored it, thinking maybe he was late for class. Finally, I got to the drinking fountain, but right as I started drinking, I heard a loud pop. I instantly shot up in reaction, listening intently. At first, it sounded like someone slamming their fist against a locker, but when more pops followed, I realized somebody was shooting a gun. I instantly ran into the bathroom to my left, turned off the light, and hid in a stall. My heart was pounding faster than ever. Eventually, the principal got on the intercom and started telling everyone to get inside and lock the doors. But I figured staying in the bathroom was my best shot at getting out of this alive. For the next solid 10 minutes, I would periodically hear running footsteps outside in the hallway. I didn't know if they were students or the shooter himself. At one point, I even heard the bathroom door open, just to hear it close again, with footsteps running in the opposite direction. Finally, a teacher opened the door and called out to see if anyone was inside. Recognizing the voice, I answered. I've never been more terrified for my own safety than I was on that day. The school ended up locking us down for over an hour until we were finally escorted onto a bus to take us home. Looking out the windows, I remember seeing pure chaos. Police were everywhere. Parents were trying to get inside the building to find their kids, and kids who were walking home were now running. All in all, it was not a pleasant sight to see. All of the kids on the bus couldn't stop talking about it, but all I could do was sit there and think that I had seen the guy. He walked right past me. Later that night, while watching the news, it was confirmed that the same student I saw walk past me in the hallway was clearly visible on TV. The headline read that 2 students were injured. To this day, the kid's motives were never made clear to me. I also don't know why the kid didn't even take notice of me in the hallway. But whatever the reason, I'm glad he didn't. Back when I was in middle school, I was in band. I played the clarinet. I always wanted to play the saxophone, but my grandpa had a clarinet, so that's what I ended up playing. If I'm being honest, I wasn't good at all, and because of this, I had to take extra lessons after school just to keep up with everyone else. The band instructor was a middle-aged man named Mr. Hall. After a while, noticing I was falling behind, Mr. Hall himself started offering me extra lessons at his house. I don't know why, but for whatever reason, the idea of taking lessons at my middle school teacher's house made me uncomfortable, and I refused. He was pretty persistent, though, and would offer at least once a week, to which each time I would again refuse. It was starting to get pretty disturbing, and I mean especially as a middle school kid. You shouldn't have to continually tell your teacher no. Anyway, one day Mr. Hall announced that our school had been invited to perform at a Christmas concert downtown. I'm not gonna lie, a lot of us were pretty excited. We all had extra rehearsals, and the school made sure we had everything we needed. Fast forward to the day of the concert, and we all met at our designated area. As we got dropped off, Mr. Hall told all the parents where to pick us up once the concert was over. Finally, the concert started, and quite honestly, it went a lot smoother than I had originally thought it would. At the end, everyone had their parents pick them up, and after a few minutes, I was the last one waiting, which meant I was now left alone with Mr. Hall. Not even a minute later, out of nowhere, Mr. Hall immediately grabbed my hand and told me I could just call my mom from his house. He proceeded to practically sprint toward the parking lot with me not far behind, still in his grip. Now I had very little experience being on my own and didn't know how to act in this kind of situation. So despite everything in me wanting to stop, I went along. I couldn't tell you exactly where he took me, but it was definitely further out than where everyone else was parked. Finally, his car came into view in a pretty shady area. It was one of those dark blue SUVs. Just then, I could hear my name being yelled from behind me. I turned to see my mom panting and sprinting toward us. To my surprise, Mr. Hall's grip tightened on my wrist, and he even began to sprint faster. That's when my suspicion of something not being right was confirmed. I started to tug back, and finally Mr. Hall gave it up, letting me go and continuing toward his car. My mom finally caught up to me, but I still couldn't process what had just happened. I'd never seen Mr. Hall act so aggressively before. My mom must have reported the whole situation, as I never saw Mr. Hall in school again. In fact, I've never heard anything about him since. Now that I'm older, I'm fully aware of the danger I was in, but I still don't like to think about what would have happened had I gotten into his car that night. If you watch my videos till end, please not forget to like and subscribe.